Clues, was not my idea. It was Rick
Riordan's idea.
Right. So Scholastic called me up and they said, hey, we have an idea for you. And I said, no, you've got it backwards. I'm the writer. I'm supposed to have an idea for you. And they said, no, come to a secret meeting. And I went out and they let me at the door and they closed the door and they locked it. It is very unusual for someone in a publishing company to lock the door. And they said, before we start, we want you to sign a secrecy agreement. I said, a secrecy agreement? And they said, yes. And I turned around and there was Gordon Corman and there was Jude Watson. And I said, what are you guys doing here? And they said, I don't know. So I signed the secrecy agreement. And we sat down.
To the lost island of Atlantis in the heart of New York City.
Yes, exactly. And they told us about this idea for the 39 Clues, and they said Rick Riordan had thought about it, but Rick is way too busy to write the stories, so we're going to do something nobody has ever done before. We're going to have a multi-author series. That way the books can come out much faster, because when it's one person, it's usually 9 months or a year. But when it's a lot of people, one person can write the book, the next person can start the next book, and the next person can start thinking about the next book, and this way we can put the books out every 3 months. Everybody's pointing. Why are we pointing over there? That is the Cahill, Philippines. These are the #1 39 Clues fans in the world.
Are you whispers?
So anyway, from this meeting, we all signed up. We all came on board, and I have to tell you a funny little story. So after this terribly secret meeting where we all came out, we were kind of shaking. We're saying, what are we getting into? My son, who was about 18, was working at Scholastic as an intern that summer. This was the summer of 2007. And I was meeting him for lunch. And I said, Nick, let's go to lunch. And he said, Dad, what are you doing down here? I said, I can't tell you. I said, I signed the secrecy agreement, as strange as it sounds. And he looked up at me and he said, oh, you're working on the 39 Clues? I said, how did you know? He said, well, they wanted to test the idea on somebody young to see if it really worked with a young person. So they gave me everything to look at. So he knew about it before I did. And they didn't make him sign a secrecy agreement.
Amazing. So what does your son think of the series now? Does he think yours are the best?
Yeah. My son, he never says that.
Do you think yours are the best? Don't tell Rick.
He thinks that. I know he thinks that, but he doesn't admit it.
Rick Riordan create the story arc and you all followed, or you all like brainstormed and created the plots together?
No, Rick created the big over series. Now, when you write a book series and you have different authors involved, every author wants to be the one that reveals the big secret, right? So what Rick did was he gave us an outline of all the books, but he made sure to make it very, very loose, so that when it came to our turn, we could add our own special ingredients to the plot. But he made sure that all the big secrets were held out till the various books, so that you couldn't reveal a certain thing in book 2, you had to wait till book 7, right? So the big mystery was planned out in advance, but all the details in the middle, those were all our responsibilities.
What is it about the experience overall? Collaborating with those great authors.
It was really fantastic. The thing is, we didn't really collaborate.
You wrote in parallel.
Yeah, it's like parallel play.
Yeah.
I mean, it was and there's a reason for it. I mean, if you can imagine an airport where there are 6 planes coming in at the same time, how do they land? Does one pilot call the other and say, hey, John, you want to go first? Go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, it doesn't, although everybody would crash, right? And it was the same way, in a way. If I thought of something new to put in the plot, and I didn't tell one of the writers, if I told Gordon but I forgot to tell Jude, for instance, everything would fall apart. So we never ever talked about the books to one another. we would talk to our editor, who was like our traffic controller, and she made sure that every single author knew of any kind of change that another author would put in. So that's how we did it. We all talked to the editor, so that whenever we got together as writers, we were free to tell silly jokes and not talk about the series.
Okay, and how did the Seven Wonders series come up? Did you create the story arc all by yourself, or did Scholastic make you do it?
No, well now, Seven Wonders is Harper Collins. And so what happened was, there were three things that I always wanted to write about. One was something about the secret continent of Atlantis, the lost continent of Atlantis. I started becoming interested in that when I was in Greece, because I still had family in Greece. The island of Crete, some people think, was the source of the lost continent of Atlantis. So I started becoming interested in that. But a lot of people have written about Atlantis. So I kind of parked that in the back of my mind. One of the things that I've always wanted to write about was a story that takes place on a desert island where kids are isolated all by themselves and they don't know why they're there. And I had an idea for a series like that years ago. It didn't quite work, and so that went to the back of my mind. The other thing that I've always been interested in is the seven wonders of the ancient world, but I couldn't really think of a way to make that come to life. So that stayed in the back of my mind. All of those three things. And the funny thing about creativity, this is a word for all of you writers, you may have an idea that you can't make it come to life.
I feel you.
It doesn't die. It stays in the back of your mind. For me, those three things, I'd never thought of putting them together. But one day, when I started connecting Atlantis with the seven wonders, well, that makes sense because it's all in the same area of the world, but nobody's ever made any connections between them before. And then the missing piece for me was the story about the desert island. So I came up with an idea of 4 kids who were descended from the royal family of the continent of Atlantis. They have a gene inside of them that connects them to the old royal family. And what this gene does is something very special. It takes whatever they're good at, whether it be computers or sports or whatever, and it turns that ability into a superpower. But anyone who has ever had this condition has never lived past the age of 14. And all of the kids who have this right now in our story are 13, and they've been taken from their home, brought to an island where there are scientists who have found a cure. And what they need to do is they need to find 7 objects that were taken from the ancient civilization of Atlantis and hidden centuries ago in the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And if they can find these 7 objects, bring them back to the secret island, they will be cured and will also save the world. Problem. Of the 7 wonders, 6 of them no longer exist. So that's the big problem that they have to face in this series.
Very interesting.